The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Mitchell's Corner Café, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floors. Sarah Chen stood at the counter, her designer briefcase resting against her leg, waiting for her usual order. At 58, she had learned to appreciate these quiet moments before the day's demands began. The young barista behind the counter tapped her card reader several times, then looked up with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, ma'am, your card's been declined." Sarah felt a flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. She reached for her wallet, checking for cash, but found only a few dollar bills, not nearly enough for the coffee and pastry she'd ordered. In all her years as CEO of Chen Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing firm her father had built from nothing, she'd never experienced this particular humiliation in such a public space. Behind her, she heard someone clear their throat gently. She turned to see a man about her age, perhaps a year or two older, with kind eyes and silver threading through his dark hair. He wore a simple blue work shirt with the name Tom embroidered on the pocket, and there was a genuine warmth in his expression that immediately put her at ease. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice carrying the soft cadence of someone who chose his words carefully. "I couldn't help but overhear. Please, let me get this for you. Everyone has one of those mornings." Sarah wanted to refuse. She wanted to explain that this was clearly some mistake, that she had more than enough money in her accounts. But something about his gentle manner, the complete absence of judgment in his eyes, made her pause. She saw no pity there, only simple human kindness. "That's very generous of you," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Thank you, truly." Tom stepped forward and paid for both their orders, waving away her thanks with a modest smile. "It's just coffee," he said. "We all need a little help sometimes." They found themselves walking to the same corner table, drawn by the morning sunlight that pooled there. As they sat down, Sarah noticed the calluses on his hands, the kind that came from years of honest work. There was something deeply grounded about him, a quiet strength that reminded her of her father in his later years. "I'm Sarah," she offered, extending her hand. "Tom Rodriguez," he replied, his handshake firm but gentle. "And before you worry about it, I'm not expecting anything in return. My mother raised me to believe that kindness isn't a transaction." Sarah found herself smiling, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Tom said, and there was a gentle sadness in his voice that spoke of loss not yet fully healed. "Lost her 3 years ago. Some days I still reach for the phone to call her, especially when something good happens. I lost my father 2 years ago," Sarah heard herself saying. She rarely spoke about her grief, had kept it carefully compartmentalized between board meetings and strategic planning sessions. "He built my company from the ground up. I think about what he'd say about my decisions almost every day." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who understood the particular ache of loss that comes in middle age, when you realize your parents won't be there to see the rest of your story unfold. "Do you have children?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the personal question. Tom's face brightened immediately. "A daughter, Elena. She's 23 now, graduated last year and just started teaching elementary school. It was just the two of us for a long time. Her mother passed away when she was only 5. Sarah felt her heart contract with sympathy. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," Tom admitted, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "There were so many nights when I had no idea what I was doing. I was working as a mechanic, trying to keep food on the table, help with homework, remember to sign permission slips, braid her hair before school." He chuckled softly. "Those braids were pretty lopsided at first, I'll tell you that much." "But you managed," Sarah said, seeing the pride in his eyes when he spoke of his daughter. "We managed together," he corrected gently. "Elena was always mature beyond her years. Had to be, I suppose, but we talked about everything. I never wanted her to feel like she couldn't come to me, even about things I didn't understand at first." Sarah thought about her own life, the careful distance she'd maintained from personal entanglements, throwing herself into work after her marriage had ended 15 years ago. Her ex-husband had resented her success, had made her feel that she had to choose between her career and their relationship. She'd chosen the career, and in many ways, it had been the right choice. But sitting here with Tom, She wondered about the quiet moments of connection she might have missed. "You're very fortunate," she said softly, "to have that kind of relationship with your daughter." "I am," Tom agreed, "though I'll admit there were times I felt like I was failing her. When she needed a mother's advice, when she had questions I didn't know how to answer. But we figured it out together." They talked for nearly an hour, the cafe filling up around them with the morning rush. Sarah learned that Tom had recently sold his small auto repair shop, deciding at 61 that it was time to slow down a bit. He'd built a good life with his hands, had put his daughter through college without any debt, and now spent his mornings volunteering at a community center, teaching young people basic car maintenance. "There's something satisfying about passing on what you know," he explained. "Seeing a kid's face light up when they successfully change their first tire, or understand how an engine works. It's about giving them confidence, showing them they're capable of more than they think." Sarah found herself sharing things she rarely discussed. The weight of responsibility she carried, the pressure of maintaining her father's legacy while also moving the company forward. She talked about the isolation that sometimes came with her position, how difficult it was to know who valued her for herself versus what she could offer them. "That's why your kindness this morning meant so much," she said. "You had no idea who I was, what I do. You just saw someone who needed help." Tom smiled, and there were laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of a life lived with humor and grace despite its hardships. "That's the only way to see people, isn't it? We're all just human beings trying to get through our days with a little dignity intact." When they finally stood to leave, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "I'd like to repay you for the coffee," she said. "And perhaps, if you're interested, I'd enjoy continuing this conversation sometime." Tom looked at the card, his eyebrows rising slightly as he read her title. "Chen Industries," he said slowly. "You're the Sarah Chen. I've seen your company's name on buildings around town." "Does that change anything?" Sarah asked, suddenly vulnerable in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Only that I'm even more impressed by how you handled this morning," Tom said warmly. "Most people in your position might have made a scene. You accepted help with grace." He slipped the card into his pocket. "I'd like that. Continuing the conversation, I mean." 3 days later, Sarah's assistant informed her that her accounts had been temporarily frozen due to a suspected security breach, which was why her card had been declined. The issue was resolved within hours, but Sarah found herself grateful for the glitch. It had given her something unexpected, something she hadn't even known she was missing. That evening, Tom called. They met for dinner at a small Italian restaurant he knew, the kind of place with checked tablecloths and candles in wine bottles, where the owner knew half the customers by name. Over pasta and red wine, they talked about their lives, their losses, their hopes for whatever years remained ahead of them. Sarah learned that Tom had a gentle sense of humor, that he listened more than he spoke, that he had strong opinions about music, and believed that Motown was the pinnacle of American artistry. She discovered that his daughter Elena called him every Sunday without fail, that he was teaching himself to play guitar, that he'd been taking care of his elderly neighbor's garden since she'd broken her hip. Tom learned that beneath Sarah's polished exterior was a woman who still missed her father's advice, who sometimes felt overwhelmed by the weight of all the people depending on her decisions, who'd sacrificed much of her personal life for professional success, and was only now, in her late 50s, wondering if the balance had been right. He saw how her face softened when she talked about the mentorship program she'd started at her company, helping young women in business find their footing. Over the weeks that followed, they fell into an easy rhythm. Coffee on Saturday mornings at Mitchell's Corner Café, now their place. Weekend walks through the park near the river, where they'd sit on a bench and watch the water flow past, sometimes talking, sometimes just being present together. Dinners at quiet restaurants where they could hear each other speak. Sarah introduced Tom to Elena. One Sunday afternoon, the young woman had her father's warm eyes and his easy kindness. She hugged Sarah without hesitation, thanking her for making her father smile more than she'd seen in years. "He talks about you all the time," Elena confided when Tom stepped away to refill their coffee cups. "I haven't seen him this happy since before Mom got sick. Whatever you two have, it's special." Tom met Sarah's small circle of close friends, the few people who'd known her long enough to see. Past the CEO to the woman underneath. They welcomed him warmly, recognizing something Sarah's ex-husband had never understood, that being with Sarah didn't mean competing with her success, but celebrating it while honoring the person she was beyond her accomplishments. As autumn painted the trees gold and crimson, Sarah and Tom discovered they were building something neither had expected to find at this stage of life. It wasn't the passionate romance of youth, but something richer, deeper. It was companionship built on mutual respect, attraction grounded in genuine affection, love that grew from really seeing and accepting each other. One cool October evening, as they walked through fallen leaves in the park, Tom took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about how strange life is. How one declined card one random morning can change everything." "I've been thinking about that too," Sarah admitted. "I spent so many years building walls, protecting myself. And then you came along and offered to buy me a coffee, no questions asked, no expectations. My mother used to say that kindness is just love in its work clothes," Tom said. "Simple, practical, showing up when it's needed." "I think about that a lot." "She was right," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "And you learned that lesson well." They stood together as the sun set behind the trees, two people who'd lived full lives separately, who'd known loss and hardship, success and sacrifice, and who'd found each other in the most unexpected way. They understood that at their age time was precious, that tomorrow was never guaranteed, and that happiness, when it arrived, should be embraced without reservation. "I'm glad your card was declined that morning," Tom said, and there was gentle humor in his voice. Sarah laughed, a sound that came more easily now than it had in years. "So am I. So am I." They walked home through the gathering dusk, two souls who'd learned that it's never too late for kindness to open. Doors you didn't even know were closed, and that sometimes the most important moments in life begin with the smallest gestures of human decency and grace.